The announcement that Terry Bogard and Mai Shiranui from SNK's Fatal Fury would be joining the roster of Street Fighter VI, and the subsequent reveal that Ken Masters and Chun-Li from SF would be included in the roster of the upcoming Fatal Fury game City of the Wolves has generated a lot of hype. This is a collab a lot of people were waiting for, and the way Capcom very lovingly recreated Terry's iconic moveset in SF6 and seems to be doing the same for Mai is really appreciable. I know some people weren't very happy about this on both sides, and I get why. Street Fighter VI's roster is heavily populated by Street Fighter II characters, leaving other series like Street Fighter III in the dust, so a season pass consisting of one character from Street Fighter III, the only SF3 representation 2 years in, along with another fucking character from World Warrior and 2 guests, feels a little insulting. Meanwhile, City of the Wolves is a sequel almost 30 years in the making, so prioritizing already existing guests from another series over other FF characters who haven't made an appearance in decades is a bit of a strange decision when separated from the obvious marketing benefits. That said, I think it's cool. So yeah, this video is about guest characters, so I'm going to talk about 2B in Grand Blue, Kratos in Mortal Kombat, Clive in Tekken 8? No. Those characters are cool because it's neat to see a character from another genre translated into a fighter, especially if combat is a central part of their original game. However, in my opinion, the far more interesting kind of guest character is one who debuted in a fighting game. I just think it's really cool when fighting game devs handle another studio's character, and getting to see how they translate them over into a different set of systems and mechanics is always a treat, just like with Terry in SF6. So today, I thought it would be fun to look at fighting game characters who guest starred in other series and see how they made the jump from game to game. Okay, so real quick disclaimer, and let me address this before you blow me up for it. I'm well aware that Street Fighter and Rival Schools are set in the same universe and that Akira in SF5 isn't technically a guest because of that, but she's still a character in Street Fighter who debuted in a non-Street Fighter game, and I think she's cool, so I'm gonna talk about her. That cool? Cool. As mentioned before, Akira is originally from Rival Schools, an older series of fighting games Capcom made. Sakura was actually playable in this game, so I suppose it makes sense a Rival Schools character would eventually make their way to Street Fighter, and here we have Akira Kazama as part of the final season of Street Fighter V. Akira is immediately a great example of what I was talking about, because her normals and specials are all present in SF5, and they make the transition into a 2D plane pretty seamlessly. Looks pretty tight. What's even cooler is her V system, which is basically tailor-made to be a reference to the mechanics of Rival Schools and Project Justice. Her V Trigger 1 has her summon her brother Daigo to perform an attack, which is reminiscent of the assist system in Project Justice. Her Trigger 2 has her create blue after images, which I think is meant to be a reference to some of her supers in her home games. The coolest reference by far is contained in her V Skill 2. One of Rival School's defining mechanics is the air combos you can perform after a launcher, and Akira can do these in SF5 with her V Skill 2, which is a launcher that sends the opponent into the sky. It looks really cool, and it lets you see the details of stages you wouldn't normally be able to. Funnily enough, this isn't the first time this mechanic appeared outside of Rival Schools. The Capcom side of the roster in Capcom vs SNK 2 is almost entirely Street Fighter characters, but there are 2 exceptions, Morrigan from Darkstalkers and Kyosuke from Rival Schools, who also has the same air combos. The hilarious thing is that Kyosuke in CVS2 is complete garbage, considered by many to be the worst character in the game, worse than Dan, so it's good to see that with Akira, the air combos are in a character who isn't terrible, and they're some of the sickest combos in SF5. Even some of the aesthetics are identical, including Akira's costumes. Her story costume is notably the same outfit worn by Powered Akira, which is an alternate playable version of Akira where she wears her biker suit with the helmet. You know, Terry and Mai are cool, but I think Capcom bridging the gap between SF and some of its other series by setting them in the same universe and giving us kinda guests like Akira is actually pretty sick. Something I hope they do more. I'd like to see Akira return in Street Fighter VI, especially now that Project Justice is coming back via the Capcom Fighting Collection 2. On the SNK side of things, King of Fighters is a series with tons of coalescence between properties. A lot of the roster in many KOF games is not just King of Fighters characters, but also characters from Art of Fighting, Fatal Fury, and other non-fighting SNK games like Psycho Soldier, where Athena hails from, and Ikari Warriors, which is where Clark and Ralph are from. King of Fighters 15's DLC, though, gave us a crossover with another one of SNK's major fighting game series, Samurai Shodown, with an entire team consisting of SamSho characters. we have Haohmaru, Nakoruru, and Darli Dagger. This is actually not Nakoruru's first KOF. She was previously on Team Another World in KOF14 along with 2 other characters from different SNK Pachinko Machine series, and prior KOF games were slated to feature Samurai Shodown based teams, but those plans fell through before 15. Gotta admit, it's kinda surreal seeing SamSho characters move like this. Samurai Shodown tends to be a pretty slow-paced game, so the sight of these guys running and short hopping is a little cursed. Not being able to combo off their normal grabs feels kinda weird too. On the other hand, I think they capture the spirit of the SamSho games well. One of the most satisfying things about Samurai Shodown is that extra crunchy hit stop from landing a heavy slash. In KOF15, Darli and Haohmaru have command normals that are basically meant to be their heavy slashes from SamSho, and they have that same extra crunchy impact on hit. All 3 Team Samurai Shodown characters also have a command normal called the Surprise Attack, which is meant to be a reference to the universal overheads from Samurai Shodown. I especially think it's really sick how one of Haohmaru's supers references the Isen super from SamSho. That just looks awesome, and Darli and Nak also have very similar looking supers to their SamSho 2019 incarnations. Unfortunately, the team didn't end up being all that great. I'm not sure about after the recent Vice and Mature patch, but I believe before that Nakoruru was the best and Haohmaru and Darli weren't all that great. Kind of a bummer, but oh well. On the subject of SamSho 2019, this game has some guests of their own, 2 of whom fit the context of this video. Hibiki from The Last Blade 2 is another instance of an SNK crossover. Hibiki, Nakoruru, and Haohmaru were all in Capcom vs SNK 2 as well, so not their first time together in a roster. I haven't really played The Last Blade 2, and to be honest, if I hadn't known already about Hibiki from CVS 2, I wouldn't have even realized she was a guest. The other one, obviously, is Baiken of Guilty Gear fame. I always found this particular collab funny, not because the character doesn't fit, she actually fits the setting really well, but because of the timing. She released in SamSho around the same time that Guilty Gear Strive came out, but Baiken wasn't added to Strive until a few months after launch. I wonder how many Baiken fans actually got into SamSho simply because it was the newest game where she was actually playable at the time of Strive's launch. Anyway, they faithfully recreated basically all of her specials from Xrd. She's got her parries, which are honestly really fitting for a game like this, that big ass Mata Tatami, her command dash, and her 6P is here as a command normal. She even has the unique ability to chain some of her normals together as a reference to GG's Gatling system, which is so cool. Also, as you probably guessed, her supers in here are also references, with her weapon flip technique being based on one of her Guilty Gear supers, and her super special move bearing resemblance to her Xrd instant kill. Pretty awesome, and the character herself is super strong, although they unfortunately didn't give her an air dash. Cowards. I'd like to segue into talking about Guilty Gear here, but Strive's only guest is from Cyberpunk Edge Runners. Totally should have been a BlazBlue character, but beggars can't and all that. Moving on from 2D games to 3D games, but ironically not leaving the subject of Samurai Shodown, let's talk Soul Calibur. This series has had a ton of guests like the aforementioned 2B, Kratos, fucking Yoda and Darth Vader, and a few others I'll get into in a bit. In Soul Calibur 6 though, Haohmaru appears as DLC. This is such a sick recreation of the character. Much like with KOF15, they brought over his specials, his supers, all that goodness, but they also gave him some unique mechanics based on his home series. Notably, he has a rage mode once he's at low enough HP that lets him use Rage Explosion just like in his own games, and that lets him perform Isen. Similar to SamSho, it gets weaker the less rage meter you have left. Appreciate that attention to detail, although it definitely doesn't have the same flair it does in SamSho. Looks kinda awkward here. Haohmaru also has a unique mechanic that lets him cancel his normals into specials. A detail I absolutely adore that we'll see more often going forward is that many of his moves can be performed with the same inputs they have in Samurai Shodown, which is a sick way of rewarding legacy knowledge. Altogether, I think they did a stellar job with him, although it's kinda hard to say how much of an impact he made on the game's meta and offline tournaments. Pretty unfortunate release window. Going back a bit, I've talked about Soul Calibur 2 before, which is well known for the console guest situation. To quickly summarize, when this game was released on consoles, every console had a different exclusive third-party character. The Xbox got Spawn, the GameCube got Link, who might be the most famous guest character in a fighting game ever if I'm being honest, and the PS2 players were blessed with Heihachi Mishima from Tekken. Can't say much about him, but seeing him do electrics in this game is really funny to me for some reason. He might seem woefully out of place in a weapon-themed fighting game, but his spot was originally meant for Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy VII before the deal with Square fell through. That may have been the only way they could have matched the hype factor of Link. Speaking of Tekken, let's get into what you were waiting for. Perhaps the most infamous guest character ever made in terms of competition, Akuma in Tekken 7. Not a completely out of nowhere collab given Street Fighter Cross Tekken exists, Akuma was added in the Faded Retribution update, and needless to say, he made a big splash in this game right off the bat. Akuma is translated in a very faithful way, with many aspects of his standard kit making the transition from 2D to 3D. He has his Fireball, his DP, his Tatsu, and even stuff like the Air and Red Fireball, the Teleport, and Demon Flip. Even a lot of his normals and strings are based on his Street Fighter buttons, which looks weird as hell in the best way possible, especially the Tekken equivalent of low forward in the Fireball. The comparatively simple motions of his specials definitely makes him stand out. I mean, most characters in Tekken 7 don't even have dedicated special move sections in their command lists, but it's one of the most unique things about him, and his ability to do Street Fighter style special cancels really does make him feel so odd in this game. More notably though, you probably noticed that super meter, not a common feature in Tekken. Akuma can do tons of things with this. First off, this version of Akuma is based mostly on SF4, since he wasn't on the roster of SF5 at this point, and they gave him one of SF4's defining mechanics, focus attacks. They work identically to how they did in SF4, even having armor like in that game. Not only can he do these though, but for one bar he can do focus attack dash cancels. For those not familiar, Focus Attack Dash Cancels, FADC for short, were a mechanic in SF4 that allowed you to cancel attacks with a focus attack, which allowed you to make safe stuff that really shouldn't have been safe, like invincible DPs. Here, it allows Akuma to confirm off buttons into Fireball for huge damage, since he can build the meter back in the combo. He can also use it for pressure, as you'd expect. In addition, Akuma can use this meter to perform EX versions of his specials, and he has a super combo that does a boatload of damage. His rage art is the Raging Demon, which I have to bring up because it just looks awesome. Between his meter, his unorthodox specials, and the ability to FADC, Akuma pretty much broke the rules of Tekken and became an absolute force in the meta, with high tournament representation as a result of how strong he is. Atif and Chikarin both took home their Tekken World Tour wins using the character, and then you had players like Super Akuma and Book who also used him. It was pretty crazy and resulted in a heavy disdain for the character, not helped by the fact that he was integrated into the story of Tekken 7 as well, which made him seem all the more out of place. Besides Akuma, we also have Geese from Fatal Fury. I've talked about him before, but to quickly summarize, he also has a meter system akin to his home games where he can perform EX versions of his specials as well as go into max mode, allowing him to reduce the meter cost of some of his moves. I don't think I've ever seen guest characters receive as much backlash as these two did. The way they just completely didn't give a fuck about a lot of Tekken's conventions and the fact that they were so strong soured a lot of people's opinions on the characters. Hell, even the idea of guest characters in the context of Tekken has such a negative connotation at this point because of these two, especially in regards to characters from 2D fighting games. I am not one to speak, but personally I think Akuma and Geese are both pretty sick, although I can understand the gripes people have. Since we're still on 3D games, let's talk about Dead or Alive, which had some fun collaborations in 5 and 6. For 5, we have guest characters from Sega's Virtua Fighter series. You could play as Akira, Sarah, Pai, and Jackie. A pretty damn sizable selection. Not a huge amount to say as I'm not super familiar with VF, but it is hilarious to see the protagonist of one of the most iconic and important fighting game series getting thrown off of a building into an explosion by a little anime girl. DOA is fucking weird, but these stage transitions are awesome. On to DOA 6, this time we have a collaboration with SNK, which is called the King of Fighters 14 mashup set, featuring Mai Shiranui and Kula Diamond. I see they were keen to jump on the Mai hype train, and Kula is an appreciable choice too. Much like with the 2D characters in Soul Calibur and Tekken, Mai and Kula have some unique mechanics inherited from those games, like conventional special cancelling off of their strings, and they translated their moves well. They fit the art style too, and goodness gracious, some of these Mai costumes. This is an opportune time to bring up that Mai was also in DOA 5, and I can't show her off because they delisted her. Fucking whack. Now we head to Undernight Inbirth, which has two characters who, funnily enough, are explicitly referred to as guests in UNI2's bios, Akatsuki and Eltnum. Akatsuki hails from Akatsuki BlitzConf and fits in pretty well given the fairly similar button layout of 3 ascending strength buttons labeled A, B, and C. In many ways, he's like these games' Shodos with the classic Fireball DP Tatsu package, and his animations are 1-to-1, with his infinite worth in Uni being based on the Kamikaze Super from BlitzConf. They even share the same name. As far as retaining the spirit of his games, he does that quite well. Akatsuki BlitzConf has a parry mechanic, and Akatsuki in Uni has a parry as his force function, even sharing that same blue circle visual. Also, proximity normals. These are a thing in BlitzConf, and Akatsuki is the only character to have them in Uni. That's actually pretty sick. I was introduced to Akatsuki from watching Unist back in 2019 when it was announced for the main stage of EVO, and I gotta admit, I had no idea he was from another game, but he always looked super sick to me, and I think that's the sign of a well-designed guest. And now that I'm familiar with his own games, I can appreciate the unique details that tie him to those and make him distinct from the Uni cast. The other guest in Uni is Sion, hailing from French Bread's other FG series Melty Blood and going by Eltnum. Considering Uni does have some mechanics taken from Melty like reverse beat and increasing, pretty sensible. Every character in Melty Blood Actress Again current code has 3 variants called moons that change aspects of their movesets, although Eltnum seems to be a mix of all 3 moons. She's got her bullets in Uni, and like with Melty, she can expend them in some of her specials, although running out forces her to reload to use them again. The warning shot and hollow point specials thankfully make up for it by being amazing in combos and being god-annoying pressure tools thankfully. AACC is a game that's heavy with air movements, and they reference this in the more grounded Uni series by giving Eltnum the ability to air dash backwards, whereas the rest of the cast can only do that forward. She's also able to influence her direction in the air after a neutral jump, just like in AACC, and again, something only she can do in Undernight. Also, she and Akatsuki both have air grabs, and you can use Eltnum's to end her combos, which is a staple of AACC combos, and that just makes me happy to see. Despite being in the cast of Uni, she wasn't in the newest Melty Blood game type Lumina, which is actually referenced in a UNI2 win quote. Both Akatsuki and Eltnum are very cool and quite strong, with Eltnum in particular being the character used by Sanaru to win EVO 2024's UNI2 tournament. On the subject of studios using characters from their games as guests, NRS has done this with the Injustice series. While most of the guests across MK and Injustice are movie and comic characters, Injustice has featured Mortal Kombat characters as DLC in the first and second installments. Scorpion is the sole guest in Injustice 1, featuring a pretty cool redesign and no bloody finishers or any of that shit. He does, however, have all of his specials like the spear and the unblockable Hellfire. Something I always found weird is, his spear move is easily the most iconic part of the character, and of course in MK it gives him a free follow-up on hit, but in Injustice he needs to spend meter to get the follow-up. Kinda odd. Of course this character is known for the dramatic tier shift he suffered as he debuted incredibly strong, with his teleport being especially egregious as it was fast and forced guesses anytime he jumped, with a combo as the reward on hit. He was super common at CEO 2013's top 8 as a result, but got subsequently nerfed, causing him to fall pretty far on the tier list. For a more detailed rundown on him and the other Injustice MK characters, I'd recommend the video Ketchup and Mustard did. It's great, and they're infinitely more knowledgeable on NRS than I am. In Injustice 2 we have 2 MK characters. First up is Sub-Zero, which makes sense as a follow-up to Scorpion. Sub is as you'd expect, but for some reason, like with Scorpion in the first Injustice, he needs to spend meter on the enhanced version of his projectile to freeze the opponent with it. Other than that, the slide is here, he has the Ice Clone as his trait, which he can throw at the opponent, and he's got a command grab and some ice weapons. He also looks really cool, no pun intended. Raiden, on the other hand. Well, I have to say, I've seen lots of praise for this design, but I don't really like the mask or the exposed chest. I think having 2 MK guests in a game with 9 DLC characters, technically 12, but the TMNT are considered 1 character slot, is definitely a little excessive, and I know that's not an opinion that I only hold. You see, Injustice 2 has a system called Premier Skins, which are costumes that change character voice lines and even modify elements of the HUD, but keep the same moveset. Raiden has a skin for a DC character called Black Lightning, which bothered some people who wanted the DC character to be playable instead of just being a skin for another guest character from Mortal Kombat. The fact that he wasn't very good didn't help. Well, I've talked about a lot of different guests from all manner of different games, so let's put an end to this by talking about Ryu and Chun-Li. But this time they're Power Rangers. Power Rangers Battle for the Grid features Ryu and Chun-Li as DLC guest characters. As astoundingly out of place as that sounds, they actually put more effort into this than you'd think at making them fit in. Ryu and Chun in this game were given unique ranger suits to fit the world, and they even have ranger names. Chun is the Blue Phoenix Ranger and Ryu is the Crimson Hawk Ranger. I suppose it's still pretty strange to see them even with the Power Rangers themed redesigns. Credit where credit is due though, in terms of animations they're very faithful. The standout mechanic of these two is their specials. Of course Ryu and Chun have all the moves they're known for, and in this game they all have the standard inputs, with Ryu having motions and Chun being a charge character. But what's so special about having motion inputs, you may find yourself asking? Well, in Battle for the Grid, the majority of the roster's specials are done with a dedicated button, kinda like Smash Bros, making Ryu and Chun's need to do actual commands unique to them. That's actually pretty cool, and I respect the devs breaking such a major convention of their game for the sake of authenticity. I also really like both their supers. Ryu's is a Shinku Hadoken, but it's a big ass beam like in the Marvel vs. Capcom games, which I always personally prefer to how it is in most Street Fighter games. Chun's, meanwhile, is literally just her critical art from Street Fighter V ported over. Ryu has his overhead and solar plexus strike, Chun has her wall jump. They did a great job bringing them over. These redesigns and this crossover as a whole emerged as a result of the mobile game Power Rangers Legacy War, which featured a collab with Street Fighter that included the Crimson Hawk and Blue Phoenix. I don't know why they revisited these designs in Battle for the Grid later, but it ended with a pretty kick-ass addition to the roster, so I ain't complaining. So, that's all the fighting game guests I could come up with. I'm sure I missed a few, but this is all I had time for. I know guest characters and FGs are kinda saturating the market right now, but since the idea probably isn't going anywhere, I hope in the future we see more experiments with adding fighting game characters to different games. Yeah, the end result isn't always the most balanced character, but I think the idea has proven to be very effective at showing the respect these studios have for each other. Haohmaru and Soul Calibur or Akatsuki and Eltnum and UNI could have just been standard members of the roster that happen to be guests, but the fact that they bring in a flavor from their original game makes them unique in a way that I personally appreciate a lot. I already know what any Tekken player watching this will answer with, but let me know. Would you like more guest characters to make the leap from one fighting game to another, or for guests to simply be characters from other non-fighting games, or movies or TV shows, whatever? Make sure to let me know. Thanks for watching, have a great night, and take care. Hey everyone, this is the part of the video where I thank all my amazing channel members. First off, I want to say I'm really sorry this took so long. I wrote the script to this video in February. It was like late January, early February. I intended to get this out before Mai released in Street Fighter 6. That was in early February and it's April now. So yeah, I've been having a variety of computer issues and stuff that have halted the release of this video, but it's here. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a fun video to work on, honestly. But anyway, time for the channel member shoutout. So I want to give the biggest of thank you, the biggest of hugs and kisses to Old Man Han, Cammy the Killer, Jazba, Mortis, Arg Seals, Wormy, Terry Hintz, Perfect Orange, Pet Shop from Fortnite, Happy the Hap Hap, HPHK, Gundog92, Isaac the Collector, Gerald Say, Loop Zoopler, Loose, Kira the Stowaway, Raymond ZX200, Nick Toyo, Sonic Frontiers is a good game, and Basewire. Thank you all so much for the support. It really does mean a lot. And just in general, and also over the past few weeks, I know that uploads have been slow, but I've just been dealing with a lot of setbacks in terms of issues with the new computer I brought and just a lot of technology, and hasn't been the easiest month for me mentally either, but I guess I'm hanging in there. Anyway, thank you for the support. It means a lot, and I definitely do have more planned, so hopefully once all my computer issues are resolved I can really start cooking, because there's so many videos I want to make, and I just have pretty big plans for the channel that I just feel like it's hard to achieve right now with the limited resources I have. Not that it's, you know, not that that's any excuse, but it's just annoying, you know. Anyway, again, thank you for watching. Thank you to my channel members. I love you all. That's me kissing you. Have a great night and take care. I love you.